Which camera do I look at when I say we're... Sorry. Hi, we're here at Fintech Live London today, and here with me for a quick chat is Stephen and Gabino Roche, President and CEO of Sapphire. Guys, welcome today to the event.
Thanks for having us.
Okay, so now can you just kind of really give us an overview of Sapphire and its role at the moment in finance? Because it's really quite a transformative company, and I think it would be great for our audience to sort of just get a basic overview of what you're up to.
Yeah, we're sort of like the Windows operating system of finance is the analogy we kind of use out there. So we look to be interoperable and connect, in the cloud. We have a cloud offering that we connect with multiple counterparties and help with all middle office and back office operations, right? From pre-trade through trading and post-trade. So we start in pre-trade because there's a lot of negligence that's happened there. Not many people have focused on finding solutions and addressing things that occurred there. But if you set up things properly in the pre-trade space, you start getting benefits during trading and post-trade. As a matter of fact, we eliminate some of the post-trade issues just because we're so much involved in the pre-trade. And I'm sure there's things that Gabino want to share.
I think just to bring it home for the audience that's not in the institutional space, I always use this fabled example. The names that I'm using are all fabled, but just to make it relatable for folks, imagine Coca-Cola starting their own pension fund. They're in the business of creating, soft drinks. They don't pick stocks and bonds and whatnot. They'll hire a BlackRock or Fidelity to do that. And doing that, they have to exchange a bunch of data and documents just to get onboarded. Then they do the same thing to open up the bank account. Let's say with Bank of New York Mellon, same data and documents. Then Bank of New York Mellon has to get together with BlackRock and Fidelity to give them access to the account for the money to trade. And the same data and documents are used again there. And then BlackRock and Fidelity will go out to multiple dealers to, whether it's JP Morgan, Goldman, Barclays, Citi, same data and documents. And you're looking at that across, let's say, the tax teams, the onboarding teams, the risk and compliance teams and legal teams, and you multiply that by each of these parties. So when Stephen says that we're this, Windows operating system in the cloud, it's the same common data and documents that Sapphire remembers. That's why we have all these patents to create memory. And then we make it easy for these firms to actually move the information around. And when the trades are done in the post-trade, when you have to settle and pay and debit and credit the accounts, we help provide that information on the other end of the trade.
Now, you chose today in your keynote presentation to focus on partnerships between fintechs. Obviously, that's become so endemic within the space with the digital ecosystem. Can you sort of give us an overview, really, of whether you see fintechs rushing into things before they're ready, or is that the problem within the space right now? Is that why you chose to sort of focus on it?
In the B2B space, it's a little bit of an oligarchy, okay? And unless you get blessed by some of these major institutions, it's hard to make traction. So I think one of the things we always recommend to fintechs in particular is to wireframe and walk through the story, the user experience very carefully with their clients when they're first starting out, because then they can identify their target clients who might be not only customers, but again, investors. And you need someone to be a mover, not just to give you money, but who's going to help use the product and push it on the street. Because again, in the B2B space of fintech, that's the only way I think that we've seen that we can get traction. In the B2C space, you can get the individual client, folks like yourself and myself, to adopt and push these institutions. But in the B2B, the approach that I mentioned, I think is the best way to go about it.
And I would just add to that a lot of these in the B2B space, fintech firms, they may, they certainly rush into things and they're excited to work on things. I used an example earlier that sometimes they look at their potential clients and they take them as investors, but that targeted client's not even using their product. How could they be investing in their business and not using their product? It just doesn't advocate your service very well, right? So it's a big no-no for us, and we saw that happen to some fellow entrepreneurs, and they worked very earnestly and honestly, and they didn't have enough, I guess, contingencies planned for situations like that, or they got enamored by the big names that came to them. And you need to take a step back and be willing to say no to these firms and try to work out something better. So that just requires more perseverance, and a lot of people don't do the self audit themselves, and they think they're the entrepreneur that can be resilient enough to see this through. But sometimes you either need help, and you need to take a step back and ask somebody else to step up for you or assist you. And other times, you just need to have more patience, right? So we just mentioned that it took 5 years before we did our Series A,
Sure.
right? So that took some time.
Yeah. So you gave us 2 stories about your own experiences. And it's obviously a very high pressured situation, particularly the second story that you told us. From a personal point of view, how do you hold the line? How do you hold your nerve? And what's it like when you're going through that?
It's a little bit of character building. So like a year ago when we spoke at your Fintech Live back then, I mean, we were bullied in grammar school and high school, but my brother and I had each other, and we never wavered, and we always fought back. And it was troubling times back then, but it built some character into you, and we were always willing to see things through. We were always very patient, and so when you practice self-discipline and patience, and you have a goal in mind on the long game, and you see that you actually can achieve them, then you see it enough times, you have the confidence to see it through. So then when we ran into those high pressure situations and we worked on contingencies, we had faith that we could see this through, even though there was a time pressure crunch, is what we were calling, a squeeze, I think Gabino called it. So
Yeah, I loved your question, and I'm sharing this with the other entrepreneurs who are thinking about this, because it's easy just to say, you got this character. I want people to think about that in your professional career today, you are practicing to be that professional. If you want to be that entrepreneur, or even in your job, you're practicing to withstand the pressure. And I think my brother and I cared about our word, our honor to our friends and family, about what we were doing. That the consequence of that was not acceptable, so we weren't going to give up. That takes a lot of conviction, a lot of determination, and then you have to go through life a little bit doing that. If you've given up too easily in the past, or you just say I just can't do it or whatnot, then yeah, it's not going to work for you. And I think also you got to have the professional humility. I mean, we're later in our professional careers. I know we look a little younger than we are, but the point here is that we've been through this before, and if you have the professional maturity, whether you have something real that you can take to market, or if you actually need the help. As Stephen mentioned it in his part of the talk, that some people, some founders have taken it as far as they can, and now they got to let someone else to kind of take over to take it to the next level, and that's okay too. It's just being professionally honest with yourself of where you are in that journey, and that wasn't for us in that case.
Okay, so I'm going to put you both on the spot here a little bit now, because I want to see if you have, say, 3 main things that you would advise, as based on your own experiences, in terms of what were the most important things to watch out for when you're forging a partnership. Are there sort of 3 top things that you could name that would make you think, that's going to work?
I mean, I think just partnerships in general, I mentioned earlier that you should be working with your fellow entrepreneurs and other fintech firms, especially if they complement you, because you can corral together and get a good groundswell of support and attention, and maybe some clients at the same time, without needing the funding, right? Because ultimately, if we could have done this business without raising any funding, we probably would have done that, right? But to scale and to grow the way we were looking at, we obviously went a different way. But in general, if I had my way, it was just to work with fellow entrepreneurs and scale this appropriately and profitably. And that's an easy thing to do that a lot of people just don't do. They're all about me, and my business, and they have a little bit of an ego, and they don't want to talk to this other entrepreneur, even though they don't even compete at all. I just don't see a need for that. And so we've been we have a philosophy of being interoperable, and we want to forge those relationships. And that's just on, the mutual B2B side. That's one thing. The second is the warrants that Gabino had talked about and structure. I think that's a very important thing. Another thing that you can do, growing your business while giving a little bit of equity, 0.5%, 1%, 2% to potential clients to help grow your business without going to a full Series A and giving up, 10, 20% more of your company, as well as, growing a large board. that's controlling things and may have veto power and all that other stuff that we were talking about. So I think those are two of the major things that people could do before they go into a full financing round to create strategic partnerships. And the last thing was the brand awareness and recognition. A lot of people don't put an effort into that. And it's easier now than ever before with the internet, social media, and LinkedIn is extremely powerful. I mentioned Twitter and YouTube are two other secondary platforms that we work on as well. We spend less than 250K on resources to help grow a media company for ourselves, right? Like that's what we're doing to help get the name awareness out there so that people would take meetings, people are interested in investing, we get some buzz out there. Those are the minimal things I think that entrepreneurs could do out there before they get into a Series A.
Around the branding thing, I'm just going to say every fintech, any startup, you're a media company too. Just come to understand that. I will say that some of our investors may find that a struggle because they're of the old mindset of like, well, what's all this stuff happening and whatnot. But honestly, it's served us well, and it's gotten our message out there, and it's actually creating good content, not just salesy one-liners. So that's one thing. The other thing I was going to say is that it's the networking component. When you're talking about strategic partnerships, it's meeting people. There are a lot of good people that want to help. There are a lot of good people that recognize a good idea, that want to help you on your journey, even if they don't come part of your company, but they work at either a potential client or potential strategic partner. So in the post-COVID world, everything's very virtual, but the coffee meets, the lunches definitely make a difference. And this is where we gain a lot of this insight that is not communicated in an official meeting that you'll hear on the side. And it also helps you think about, for these strategic partnerships, where they're coming from. And even some of those folks who are actually at the table negotiating those terms, you take them out to lunch, you take them out to coffee, you get a little more color, you build a little more rapport, and it becomes a lot better. Not everything is as intense as we told in our stories. There's been a lot of good stuff too along the way.
Now, the big question always is it's so difficult at the moment for companies, and the sort of the global sort of financial instability is making things really tough. From your point of view, do you have any predictions for the next 12 months in terms of where you think the markets will go?
I think it's going to get a little worse before it gets better. So that's just my uneducated guess. I'm no expert, no economist. If you're starting to build a business now, that's going to be tough to find money, right? It's going to dry up. And so if you have a business that helps save money, create efficiencies, and this is the time for you for sure, but then you got to make sure you can talk to those heads in those organizations that are going to give you the time of day. And I think what's going to happen is, when I say it's going to get a little worse, I think some of the policies that have been adopted globally from the different governments are going to change course a little bit, because they're going to realize, there's a ton of inflation, and that's been the biggest problem. And I think we can't just deny that the spending is creating that, right? Post-COVID, totally understood, right? We had to help people and whatnot. I think now there's got to be a little backtrack from that. I think we overcorrected. And so when that happens, I think we're going to start seeing things come back a little more to normal.
I would just not discourage anybody who's starting a business right now, because a lot of big major companies or startups happen during recessions, right? So if you have a business that, a lot of these companies are restructuring and trying to find ways to save money, and they're cutting headcounts. If you have a technology that's already scalable, this is an opportunity to tell a business case to them about using the technology now, because it augments your staff support. But at the same time, if you're in a position where you need to raise funds, you're going to be in a bad position. You should have looked at that several months ago before this position, and maybe even if you didn't need the money 6 months ago, you should have looked and raised then and have a good position of negotiating back then before you get into a position now where it's very dire. So that was probably the dichotomy, that depending on the type of firm or entrepreneur and the situation you're in, if you're running out of money, you should have planned before, and now you got to get creative. If you're looking to start, maybe you don't need a lot of money, and this is a good time to start pitching the ideas, and you may find success because companies are now forced to get creative, and they may take on your idea.
And the next obvious question is, what's coming up for SAP? What are you guys going to be doing over the next 12 months?
There's a lot more in press releases coming out. We already did a couple that we actually pre-recorded one because we were on this Euro trip and we didn't know if it was going to happen while we're gone. So there's going to be significant announcements that come in place. So definitely stay tuned for that, and you guys will be covering, I'm sure, getting some exclusives. But yeah, I mean, I think we just announced, fund accounting is something that we're beginning into. Securities lending is another big space that's out there that really doesn't have true innovation. And we have, 105 patents that remember data and documents and the counterparties that are involved. This is a very specific strategic advantage, and there are companies, people that are working with us already that you heard in our announcements, they're testing this whole process out, and we'll probably have some news with their names involved in that whole space. So I think that's a huge piece of news. We'll we'll wait and see and how that develops. But I don't know if there's anything else you want to share.
Yeah, we were talking about efficiency plays in this given economy. I think you're going to see more about you do things right in pre-trade, leveraging our technology. We eliminate most of the issues in post-trade. And so when you get that kind of benefit, it becomes a no-brainer. I think that's going to be the theme. And I think more of these institutions are going to be looking for technology. I mean, I just talk about inflation. A lot of these financial institutions are moving resources to Asia Pacific, right? To the Philippines, India, China. But if inflation's up, 8-9%, that you've just lost the margin that you thought you were achieving by moving those resources offshore. So it's about working smarter. It's about having technology that can get you those efficiencies, and having the right context to run your business more smoothly. So.
All right, great. And finally, what are your takeaways from this year's FinTech event so far? How are you finding it?
Well, we just opened, so we got to go and I think run around a little bit and talk to folks. But I mean, even before we got on stage, there was a ton of energy. A lot of folks came by. They've been seeing our content through FinTech, through Business Click Media, and honestly, it's been a little humbling, just because I don't know. My brother and I don't think much of ourselves per se, but like just the fact that people recognize us is kind of fun. So and already we met a bunch of entrepreneurs who are starting their own businesses. One gentleman came by, who was telling me how he's been able to get some revenue out the door, so he can build out his product even further because they've got a minimal viable product. So those are stories I love, and that's why we come back to FinTech every year, and I think we're going to have more of those conversations.
Yeah, I'm looking to get antiquated and get to know a lot of the people here at the event. We had a lot of people stop by our booth, and we just didn't have the time because we were running because of the opening headline speakers here. So as soon as we're done with this, I already see a bunch of people over there. So we're going to go and say hello to them and just get involved with this whole event. It's a beautiful event.
That's fantastic. Stephen and Gabino, Roche, thank you so much for chatting to us today.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you very much.